Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming and joining our press conference. And I say ours because the Honorable Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, with his state in partnership with President Donald Trump to make America safe again, a promise the president has kept for the American people since day one in office. In his first month of office, President Trump closed the border to illegal aliens invading our country, and now Secretary of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and I am proud to announce that daily border encounters have decreased to a low of 94%, a low that we've never seen in decades. I know Secretary Noem is remiss she cannot be here, but given the President's emergency declaration for the deadly flooding in Kentucky, she's where she needs to be to get the Kentuckians the recovery, support, and resources they so desperately need. I want to pause for a second and give a special thanks to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis for graciously allowing us to host this press conference here at the Homestead Air Force Base, and to all the resilient service members. Thank you for all you do to keep our country safe, for your noble service to the United States of America, and all the other state and local law enforcement officers here today, thank you. We're here to discuss border security, specifically the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement ICE 287G program. In a nutshell, this program allows ICE to give state and local law enforcement officials the authority to perform the same duties as ICE officers, identify criminal illegal aliens invading our country. So you may wonder, what makes the 287G program unique? For one, state and local law enforcement agencies, such as here in Florida, voluntarily participate in this program, working in collaboration with ICE. And I must add, the key to the success of this program under President Trump is the cooperation with law enforcement to amicably collaborate with ICE to apprehend aliens with serious criminal records, who under President Biden were released from state and local detention instead of safely being transferred to other jail or correctional facilities pending their removal. Secondly, the 287G functions utilizing three models: the warrant service officer model, the jail enforcement model, and the task force model. The warrant service officer model program allows ICE to train and authorize state and local law enforcement officers to serve in executive administrative warrants on aliens in their custody. The jail enforcement model is designed to identify and process removed aliens with pending criminal charges who are arrested by state and local law enforcement. And then the task force model serves as a force multiplier for law enforcement agencies, enabling them to enforce immigration violations in their routine police duties. All three models, the warrant service officer model, the jail enforcement model, and the task force model, serve the same purpose: to rid our country of criminal aliens invading our communities, while simultaneously reducing criminal aliens back into the country. ICE's warrant service officer model, jail enforcement model, and the task force model highlight the effectiveness of President Trump's executive order, protecting the American people against invasion, aimed at removing and stopping illegal aliens from invading our country. In fact, ICE arrests have doubled, and arrests out of fugitives have tripled under his watch, all during the first month in office. Most importantly, ICE partnerships with state and local law enforcement officers directly correlates and reflects President Trump's promise to carry out mass deportations. The ICE 287G program enhances public safety by allowing ICE partnerships with state and local enforcement agencies to identify and remove incarcerated aliens before they're released back into our communities. And as of February 25th, 2025, ICE has signed 80 warrant service officer agreements in 12 states, 64 jail enforcement agreements in 17 states, and 17 task force agreements in 6 states. And I'm happy to report that under President Trump, 287G partnerships are a success, with more partnership agreements being signed continuously, most recently right here in the great state of Florida. The Florida Highway Patrol, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, the Florida Wildlife Conservation Commission, and many more state agencies signed the task force model agreement earlier this month. And I'm happy to announce that today all Florida sheriffs have signed into the agreements for both the warrant service officer and the task force model agreements. And I just want to highlight the Laken-Riley Act, President Trump's first piece of legislation into law, named Laken Riley, a 23-year-old nursing student who was murdered by an illegal Venezuelan alien, Jose Antonio, an illegal alien on February 22nd, 2024, under the Biden administration. This law mandates the federal detention of illegal immigrants who are accused of theft, burglary, assaulting a law enforcement officer, and any other crime that causes death or serious bodily injury. Again, this ties directly into President Trump and keeping his promise, as he said from the start. Criminals have no place in the homeland. Keeping America safe again with the president's vision to stop any illegal aliens murdering our innocent Americans. All this positivity activity under the umbrella of ICE, which falls under Secretary Noem's jurisdiction, reflects President Trump's goal and promise to make America safe. With that, I'd like to introduce Governor Ron DeSantis.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thanks so much. Well, thanks so much to Keith and to DHS. I did speak with Secretary Noem yesterday. She sent her regrets. She did get called to go to the flooding and what's happened in Kentucky, but I appreciate her interest in what's going on here in Florida and how we're supporting the mission. You know, 4 years ago, we had to scramble assets in Florida to send to the border in Texas to compensate for the fact that the president had opened the border and didn't want to enforce our immigration laws. So Florida was the first state. We had FDLE, Highway Patrol, National Guard, a variety of folks that cycled through those missions over months and years, and we were happy to do that. But the reality was that was the states banding together to try to make up for the federal policies which did not equate to a faithful execution of the law. We also, and that was our Operation Lone Star, we also launched Operation Vigilant Sentry for the coastal interdictions. And we know we've got a lot of great Coast Guard folks, we've got a lot of great CBP folks. The reality was there weren't enough folks there during the Biden administration to stop all the vessels. So we surged Marine assets. I know you look at, I saw Sheriff Bradshaw from Palm Beach. They've got awesome radar. They can kind of do this. So this has kind of become a great science where you see boats with people. Illegals will have arms and guns sometimes. Sometimes they'll have drugs. But the reality is we have a right to protect our coastland and our border. So in the last year and a half, Florida assets are responsible for 19,000 interdictions of illegal aliens, and that has led to almost 18,000 repatriations. We send them to the Coast Guard. Coast Guard takes them back, and more than 470 vessels that have been removed. So I want to thank everybody that's been involved in that. That's made a huge, huge difference. Of course, we have Larry Keefe here, who's the immigration czar now for the state of Florida. He was involved in some of our transport operations, you know, people sending to California, New York, even Martha's Vineyard. And that had a huge impact on how people perceive this issue. At the election in November, this was one of the biggest issues, if not the biggest issue, that people voted on. And we are really excited to have a new sheriff in town in the White House with President Trump. Florida, though, we've also understood we've got to do what we can with our own laws. So in 2023, we enacted an E-Verify program for all employers, including private. You know, the legislature said, well, you don't want to burden the really small ones, so they got to have 25 employees. And that has made an impact. But there's now a bill filed in the Florida House to say, let's just do full-blown for all employers. So I support that. I think it would be great. And I think it helps remove the magnets that cause people to want to come here illegally in the first place. We can do all the interdictions in the interior enforcement, and we will. We'll be helpful. And I know there's a newfound sense of purpose in the federal assets given the change of administration. But if you just remove those enticements, then that goes a long way to solving the problem as well. So in Florida, we're on board for that. We want to make sure that the legislature, this bill's filed. I think they're going to pass it, and we want to make sure that we get that signed into law as soon as possible. We've also worked hard to crack down on fentanyl. What FDLE and some of our partners have done has been incredible. We've also cracked down on illegal voting. You have people that are in this country illegally that have voted, and we've held them accountable. First of all, you have to be a U.S. citizen in order to vote in Florida. That's in our Constitution. That should be the case everywhere. If you're here legally but you're a foreigner, you can't vote. And obviously, if you're here illegally, you can't vote. So we were able to bring charges in many different situations. Now, as was mentioned by Keith Pearson, I immediately, upon President Trump taking office, said our agencies are going to work with the federal government to conduct interior enforcement operations. And so Florida Highway Patrol under Dave Kerner, first state agency to do a 287G agreement. Then we had Mark Glass, FDLE, do a similar one. Even Florida Fish and Wildlife and our Florida State Guard, as well as, and this is under the Commissioner of Agriculture, Wilton Simpson, but you do have the Department of Agriculture and their enforcement. They are doing a 287G agreement. And you look, there's been huge successes. Just last week in Gadsden County, FHP and FDLE partnered with Homeland Security and ICE to conduct 58 traffic stops. It led to 8 arrests. 6 illegal aliens were identified. Some already had deportation warrants. In the Panhandle, FDLE worked with federal partners to arrest 2 illegal aliens from Jamaica who were distributing fentanyl. In Jefferson County, FHP, FDLE worked with federal partners to arrest a subject illegally in the country who was wanted for state and federal child pornography charges. So I want to thank our folks who've been involved with that. Thank ICE and the federal partners. This is really important that these operations are being done. You know, when Biden was president, there were these people that were just knowingly out there. They knew that some of these people were out there, and they just decided not to do anything about it. Those days are over, and I'm glad Florida is part of the solution. We have signed these 287G agreements. So Keith mentioned this. We did legislation in Florida. We were the first state to do it. I called the special session of the legislature for late January. I think the bill, we finally passed the legislation sometime in February. But amongst those, there's a bunch of things in there that are good. End, catch, and release, make it a crime to come into Florida illegally. But we said all state and local law enforcement have a duty to participate to the fullest extent possible with federal immigration enforcement efforts. And so today, I'm proud to say that all 67 Florida sheriffs representing our 67 counties, each one of those sheriffs has executed this 287G task force model agreement with Department of Homeland Security. We're the only state in the country where all of the counties have done this. This is not just saying, oh, if there's an illegal alien in our jail, then we'll let ICE pick them up. Obviously, you got to do that. It's also not saying that, oh, well, we'll honor a detainer or a warrant. Of course you have to do that. This is a task force model which will lead to street-level enforcement operations. We had 2 illegal aliens on the top of a building dumping debris into a canal in Broward County. They probably weren't the only illegal aliens involved in that work site. There's probably a lot more. So this is the maximum participation that a local entity can have under current federal arrangements. And under Biden, the 287G, certainly the task force model, that lay dormant for 4 years. No one was doing it. If you wanted to do it, they wouldn't sign you up for it. I know we couldn't do it. So I thank President Trump for resuscitating this. Thanks Secretary Noem, thanks to Tom Homan and Keith Pearson and everyone that's been involved in this, because the reality is the American people spoke very clearly. They're sick of having an open border, and they're sick of the rule of law being ignored. They want to have our country's laws enforced. They want their communities protected, and they want to see people who don't have a right to be here return to their country of origin. So President Trump promised to conduct the largest deportation operation in American history. The fact is, if the state and locals are not fully participating in those efforts, it's going to be very difficult to achieve that. So Florida, we've stood up. We want to be part of the solution. We are going to be there every step of the way. All of our law enforcement agencies have this duty that they need to fulfill. And we're working with the police. I know we've got some of our police chiefs here, and I want to thank them. They're serving on the task force, and I appreciate what you guys are doing. We've got like over 400 police agencies, and so we're working on how to do those agreements, and I know Keith's involved in that. But we're going to get there with all that stuff. It's very, very important. So this is really the model for other states to follow. If all the states did this, this problem would go away much quicker. I'll tell you that. And your communities will be safer. The taxpayers will have less burdens placed on them. You know, some people say, oh, if you're here illegally, as long as you don't commit like serious felonies. And I'm just like thinking to myself, first of all, that's not the law. Second of all, if you come illegally and you're working, a lot of times these guys pay their very cheap wages, right? They don't want to pay American level wages. They're paying cheap wages. But the thing is then the taxpayers pay health care if something happens. Taxpayers pay education if they send kids to school because the Supreme Court says you have to do it. Then there's law enforcement. So it does impose burdens on the community, irrespective of whether additional crimes are committed. So that's why I think this is so important. So I want to thank everybody that's been involved. Our legislation really stands as a model. All of our operations we've been doing. And we worked well with the Coast Guard even when Biden was in, and we worked well with the folks. But, you know, there were certain handcuffs that were put on the federal assets, and that's different now. So I think the success is going to be so much better. Now, all the sheriffs, I think, have been great. They've stepped up, signed these agreements. We're doing full-blown 287G task force model. There's going to be a lot of training that takes place. We've been working, Larry Keefe, our immigration czar, you know, he's been involved in public safety. He was a U.S. attorney under President Trump the first time. He served as our lead public safety official earlier in my administration. Now he's the immigration czar. He's got a lot of experience, Martha's Vineyard, all these other things. He was the one really leading the charge, and he's worked really hard to get all this stuff in line. So I have authority. If you don't live up to your responsibilities to assist, you can be suspended and removed from office. But we didn't have any sheriffs drag their feet. They all got on board and signed these agreements. So all they got to do is live up to those, and I think they're going to be in really, really good shape. So I'm really excited to be here. And I also want to recognize some of the sheriffs we have here. You have Bill Primel from Charlotte, Wayne Ivey. I saw some other folks out there. I want to thank you guys. Actually, Wayne, I think you're going to do. Wayne, come up here and tell them what you got cooking in Brevard.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Governor. Governor, if you don't mind, I'd love to have our sheriffs that are with us today. We have them from all over the state of Florida. If they could please stand. Of course, we have our newest sheriff to the state of Florida from Dade County. Governor, the best way I can put it, sir, is thanks to you and the leadership from our legislature, Florida sheriffs, our partners with the state and our chiefs from our local agencies, we are ready to roll, sir. These new tools, these new resources that you've given us through this newly passed state law gives us exactly what we need to be a force multiplier for our federal partners. And that's what this really boils down to. It is a force multiplier. It gives us the ability to not only to work with our federal partners to enforce the immigration laws, but also to enforce our new state laws that are so important to us, that were such a big part of the special session, giving us those tools to, if somebody is in our country illegally, they're going back. If somebody's in the state of Florida that's here in our country illegally, this new law gives us the ability to hold them accountable and to take them in, sir. And we appreciate it. We are blessed. You look at any other crime in our country, and what you see is that when it crosses state lines, local, state, and federal partners all work together. That hasn't always been the case on immigration. But today, thanks to these agreements that have been signed, the task force model, thanks to the new state law that we have, we're all working together for the same thing, and that is to keep Florida's communities the safest in the country. And we're doing one other thing, and that is we are setting the table for other states to follow. Under Governor DeSantis, his leadership, our state has always been called the free state of Florida, and we are going to make sure that other states follow suit, and we give them a model that will work for them just as it's working for us. Thank you, Governor.
Thanks.
When President Trump was sworn in on January 20th, I was a retired grandpa with my grandchildren in Shalimar, Florida, and I said to myself, this is a perfect storm of goodness for this country. This is a perfect moment. And I knew that because I'd served, as the governor said, President Trump as a U.S. attorney in his first administration. When we had order, we had secure borders, there was law and order, and I got to experience that. When that administration ended and our country's borders opened and law and order didn't mean anything anymore, I wanted to get back to work, and I went back to work for Governor DeSantis as the public safety czar. We were fighting a war against these open borders and against this invasion of illegal aliens in Florida, in each of the states, in each of our communities, with one hand tied behind our back, and quite frankly, two hands tied behind our back, because we did not have, at that time, the federal leadership that we needed for federal support. And that's So we had to fight the fight as we could fight it, with relocations to Martha's Vineyard or whatever we could do to fight back and not take it. So on January 20th of this year, when I was in Shalimar, there was a perfect storm. I wasn't in the game anymore. I wasn't on the field playing. I was just a granddad. But I said, man, I would love to get into this perfect storm. We have President Trump as a president in his second administration, fired up after what he's seen the last 4 years. We have Governor DeSantis in our cabinet. And then a few weeks later, we have a special session where our legislature and our cabinet and Governor DeSantis came together to create this legislation, to create these tools, to let Florida and the other states, if they have the will, and other local communities, if you have the will, the resolve, and the intention, to find them, sort them, detain them, and deport them. Total relentless, no BS, straight on it. You hear President Trump say it every day, mass deportation. So we want Florida. We like to compete with Texas, Oklahoma, the other states. We are ready to be the #1 state, the bellwether, the leader of the Florida blueprint on how you do it. And a perfect poster sheriff in this regard is Sheriff Wayne Ivey of Brevard County. Sheriff Ivey, I'm not going to steal his thunder or leak any of your classified intel of your program, but you watch and see what happens in Brevard County, Florida with Sheriff Wayne Ivey as the example of the kind of sheriff that I'm here to serve, support, get him what he needs. That's what the Florida legislature has said. That's what Governor DeSantis, that's what our cabinet has said, and it's what our president wants. It's nothing like having a clear mission. So thank you. Thank you.
Well, we're excited for the teamwork. I think this is really great that we have all our local agencies working with the state agencies in support of this really important national mission. And the president earned a mandate in the election in November. And I think if you look at the dizzying pace that they've set, he's intent on fulfilling all the mandates that he has for change and for action, this being one of the most important issues. So we're on the team. No state has done more to support these efforts. We're leading by example for our other states, and we wouldn't have it any other way. Okay, any questions? Yes, sir. So I want to focus today not on the 26th election, but on vindicating the 24 election by showing that we're going to get this job done here. You know, you have these elections, and then people start talking about new elections. Why don't we actually get something done based off the previous election? And I think President Trump deserves all Republicans in particular to be supporting those efforts. That's what we're doing here, and we're going to continue to do that. In terms of the numbers, we have now a force multiplier in Florida with our then we'll see what the feds have for their target. But yes, whatever target they give us, our goal is to meet and exceed that 100%. I know given our geographic location, we have easy access to sending to Gitmo. I think that's really smart to use Gitmo strategically. If you have countries that are not going to accept their own citizens back who came to our country illegally, we can't just detain them on the mainland indefinitely, and we certainly can't just release them back into the community. So sending to Gitmo, I think, is a really, really good thing. We're happy to be part of that. I know I've been asked, can you provide some personnel in Gitmo? We're looking at that. So there's a whole host of things that are coming together. We are way ahead of the curve in Florida. The DHS, I think they're doing a great job given how decimated the agency got under Biden. So they're having to really put these pieces back together. So they're working very quickly with Florida in the lead. So we will meet and exceed expectations, that I can tell you. Yes, ma'am. I don't. If there's anything that we set up, we will let people know that what we're doing. If they did do it here, I'd likely be a federal operated detention facility. It's possible. I mean, I think any federal installation, as these guys look, how do you hold illegal aliens to process them for deportation, I think they would look at any federal installation would be something that they potentially can do. This is obviously a pretty big installation. It has easy access to the Americas if that's where they're flying people back. So it's possible that they're doing that. Now, us, if we are doing things to supplement, because, you know, there's a limited space in county jails and in state facilities with that, so we may need to supplement. And we do have money that was appropriated by the legislature. We're going to be smart and strategic about that. But we have different installations as well. So we're going to work through. It'll be a partnership. And if they ask us to supplement and we have the wherewithal to do it, you know, my view is going to be we should do it. We should help. Yes. Do you have a question? I'm sorry. Do you have a question?
Well, our staff was out there during the storms. It was a tragedy that hit St. Lucie County, as it affected many of other Floridians throughout here. So we gave our mission, our troops, to go out there. Our troops were out there and provided every assistance they can. The Florida National Guard came within hours. They were on scene there with it. And we did everything we possibly can to save as many lives as we can. Well, I wasn't aware of any of our deputies leaving the scene. I know we had crews around the clock. Now, if they sheltered somewhere during the high winds, that's a possibility. But our staff worked 24/7. We did a full recall in from the agency when the tornadoes first touched down. That wasn't expected. So we did everything we possibly can, and that day we did save lives with the assistance from the governor and other staff in there.
Ma'am?
So, yeah.
Florida is absolutely not a sanctuary state. That was even true under Biden. We are not a sanctuary state. In fact, my first year as governor, we pushed through the ban on sanctuary cities, and we have an ability to obviously hold people accountable for that. Now under this, if you're a sanctuary, you can be removed from office, you can be fined. But even if you're not a sanctuary, if you're just sitting on your hands and you're not offering assistance when requested to the best of your efforts and the maximum ability, you could also be held accountable. So we are the furthest thing from a sanctuary state. We are really a duty-bound state to assist, and that's different. I don't think there's any other state that's gone as far as we've gone. I think there was one state that just did something. I don't know if it was in Tennessee, maybe. I think they said, we encourage local law enforcement to help, which is great, but that's not an enforceable duty. In Florida, we have an enforceable duty to help and to be a part of the solution. And this task force model means we're not just going to say, okay, you know, if you're here illegally, unless you end up in jail, we're not going to do anything. Yeah, obviously, if you're in jail, they should be turned over, but there'll be operations on the street. That's how we're getting these illegals. That's how we busted the Chinese. There was 19 Chinese illegal aliens from all the way in China, probably came through the Bahamas, because there's been a lot that have been there, and they're going around Miami and Coral Gables and these areas, so you're able to do that. So this is the furthest thing from that, and if there's any official who wants to be a sanctuary jurisdiction, just please understand, you are violating Florida law, and you will be held accountable, and that defiance will not stand in the state of Florida. Well, what you said, I think, is something I hear a lot about, you know, what do you say to immigrants? First of all, I think we have probably the highest legal immigrant population as a percentage of anywhere in the country. And you have every right as anybody else if you're here legally. If you're here illegally, just know that the law is the law. And I understand, like, not everyone who's here illegally is necessarily committing serious crimes, but you either have a country or you don't, and I know the president is intent on making sure that the law is applied. But I think it's wrong when the media conflates an illegal alien with somebody who has immigrated here under some of our lawful programs. And we've had a lot of folks that have done that over many years. And honestly, I think a lot of them are the ones that hate the illegal immigration the most, because it's like, why did they go through some of these processes if other folks don't have to do it? So I do think there's an attempt on the left to try to act like anybody that wasn't natural born could somehow be sent away. And if you've come legally and like you're a naturalized citizen or you're here legally with a green card, that's much different than somebody who is here illegally. And, you know, you have, and some of this stuff can be in flux. The president removed some of the TPS that was granted. I think that when Biden did that, I don't think it was consistent with what the intent of the law was, but that now changes the dynamic in terms of where you are. So you just got to know that, and you've got to respect the laws that are being enforced. And if there's things that are rolled back through executive discretion, you have to recognize that as well. That's just the way the world works. Yes, ma'am. Oh, I'm sorry, you already got one. Who we go? Why don't we go right here? Yes, sir. So 287G, there is federal reimbursements available for operations. We also just had appropriated $250 million from the legislature to be able to supplement and to reimburse through these grant programs our municipal and county law enforcement agencies. And what I said from the beginning on that is we want everyone to have a duty to be on the team and to be part of the solution and to assist with the enforcement. But we don't believe in unfunded mandates, and we are going to have adequate money. So that money's there. At the next cabinet meeting, I think we're going to decide on the criteria that we're going to use for the grant operations. You know, for example, there may be some grants for some detention operations, but and that'll be we'll codify what that looks like. There'll be some grants for additional personnel, additional training. We understand that we're not trying to displace other duties. We're trying to supplement the federal government, and obviously that $250 million is important, and then the federal reimbursements will be important as well. If the federal government were to set up a detention facility like here, obviously they'd be funding that. I think that's one of the things they're looking to get in this new whatever funding bill comes out of the Congress, whether it's a continuing resolution, and I doubt they're going to do the individual appropriations bills, but I do think they want to put some resources in there to fortify the border operations, but also to fortify interior enforcement operations. And I do think it should be said, when President Trump was running against Kamala Harris, and they had a debate about the border, Harris said, because the border was what it was, there was a lot of legacy media that tried to act like it wasn't a big deal, but people saw what was happening. So it wasn't credible to say that it wasn't happening. So what Harris said was, well, we wanted an immigration bill and you guys helped tank it. That would have helped us secure the border. And then candidate Trump turned to her and said, you don't need a bill, just do it. So he became president, and what happened? Did he need a bill to secure our country? No, he just did it. And so you have a 94% drop in border crossings since January 20th, and year over year, however you want to do it. That's remarkable. That shows what Biden and Harris were saying was not true. They were selling you snake oil. You didn't need legislation. You just needed a determined president. So I think that's a great success story already. I know there's going to be more that they need to do at the border. I think they need to actually finish the border wall, because if someone like Biden becomes president again, if you have a wall, they can't really it's hard to take that down. Whereas if you don't, then they can open the border and just not enforce. So we have, I think, as a country, reestablished the security of the border such that, yes, they're interdicting, but a lot of people have determined they're not going to come anymore because they know it's likely not going to work out for them to do. They actually had the app where you could sign up as you're getting ready to cross the border and then cross the border. I mean, how ridiculous is that? And so that's been discontinued. And you had a lot of people during Biden's time that would pay coyotes thousands of dollars to be able to be shepherded across our southern border. Just think of all the abuse that occurred just because of that. How many young people, these young girls, have been abused, sexually abused, sold into human trafficking? I mean, it was really, really terrible. So the rule of law is prevailing, our sovereignty is prevailing, but just what's happened in the last 30, 35 days gives lie to this idea that you needed this piece of legislation, which, oh, by the way, should have been killed because it codified that you could have 5,000 illegal crossings a day before the border could even be shut down. I think the appropriate number of crossings is 0. We don't want any illegal crossings. 5,000? Are you kidding me? So it was a total ruse from the beginning, and the president's actions have really have shown that that was a lie, that you needed to do that. So I commend the president. I commend the Trump administration for what they've done at the border. I know they're working really hard on interior enforcement. It's obviously doing better than it was under Biden. But we need all the states to do what Florida's doing. If we all get on board, I think you're going to see a great success story. If you allow states like California and New York to sabotage these operations, that's going to make it much more difficult if they're sanctuary states. But even if you have normal red states who just don't want to be involved, that's going to make it more difficult as well. So I want to thank everybody here, our federal partners, our state agencies, our police, and our sheriffs. This is a team effort. Everyone understands the people that elect us to these positions, they want to see this problem solved once and for all. Thank you, everybody. Take care.